Hana pressed her back against the cold metal wall of Seoul High School. She held her breath as Kim Ji-hyo and her group of friends walked past, their voices loud and cheerful. They talked about weekend parties and new clothes. Hana waited until their footsteps faded before she moved again. This was her daily routine. She knew exactly when to hide, when to move, and when to sit quietly in her corner seat. At 17 years old, Hana had become a master of being invisible. She preferred it that way. The year was 2157, and Seoul looked very different from the old pictures in history books. Flying cars moved between tall silver buildings. Holographic advertisements floated in the air. Students carried tablet computers that responded to their thoughts. But inside the classroom, some things never changed. Popular students still sat in the front. Quiet students still hid in the back. Hana took her usual seat in the far corner of room 304. She pulled out an old paper book about ancient wars. Most students read digital books now, but Hana liked the feel of real pages. She enjoyed reading about famous battles and clever military strategies. Her classmates thought she was strange. "Why do you always read those boring books?" Park Min-ho had asked her once. He was the school's best athlete and one of the most popular boys. "Don't you want to have fun?" Hana had just shrugged and kept reading. She found war stories more interesting than gossip about who was dating whom. Her only real friend was Choi Daeun, who worked as a helper in the school library. Daeun was quiet like Hana, but she loved old documentary films about space battles and historical wars. They would sit together during lunch and watch these films on Daeun's small screen. "Look at this battle from the Europa War," Daeun whispered during lunch that Tuesday. She showed Hana a documentary about space fighters attacking a large enemy ship. The small ships won by attacking from unexpected angles. Hana nodded, studying the tactics carefully. She always noticed small details that others missed. In this battle, she saw that the small ships waited for the big ship to turn before attacking its weak spots. "The timing was perfect," Hana said quietly. "They knew exactly when to strike. Most of their classmates ignored them completely. Lee Jae-hyun and his friends sometimes made jokes about the weird girls who watch war movies, but Hana did not care. She had learned long ago that being noticed usually meant trouble. In Professor Yoon Sang-ho's history class, Hana always sat in the back row. She listened carefully but never raised her hand. She understood the lessons better than most students, but she kept her knowledge to herself. When other students gave wrong answers, she stayed silent. The ancient Korean generals won battles through superior numbers, Professor Yoon said that day. Hana knew this was not always true. She had read about General Yi Sun-sin, who won sea battles with fewer ships by using better tactics. But she did not correct the teacher. Speaking up would only bring attention. After school, Hana walked home through the busy streets of Seoul. Delivery drones flew overhead carrying packages. People talked to their AI assistants through small earpieces. The city hummed with advanced technology, but Hana noticed things others missed. She saw that the delivery drones always followed the same flight paths. She observed that security cameras had blind spots at certain intersections. She noted which buildings had the strongest defenses and which ones looked vulnerable. These observations were just a habit. Hana had always been good at seeing patterns and finding weaknesses. It was a skill that made her feel useful, even if no one else appreciated it. At home, her parents were busy with their jobs. Her mother designed computer programs for the city government. Her father worked as an engineer for spacecraft manufacturing. They were kind but distant, focused on their important careers. "How was school today?" her mother asked while checking her work messages. "Fine," Hana replied as always. Her parents nodded and returned to their screens. They had never understood their quiet daughter who preferred old books to modern entertainment. That evening, Hana sat in her room working on a small electronic device she had built from spare parts. It was a simple scanner that could detect different types of energy signals. She enjoyed taking apart old electronics and rebuilding them in new ways. As she worked, she listened to news reports on her wall screen. The reporters talked about strange signals detected at the edge of the solar system. Scientists said they might be natural phenomena from distant stars. But something about the reports made Hana uncomfortable. The signals appeared in organized patterns, not random like natural phenomena should be. They reminded her of military communication codes she had read about in her war books. She thought about mentioning this to someone, but who would listen? Her parents would say she was being dramatic. Her teachers would tell her to focus on schoolwork. Her classmates would just laugh, so Hana kept her concerns to herself just like everything else. The next morning brought terrible news. The strange signals had grown stronger during the night. Then, just as students were arriving at school, the sky above Seoul began to change. Massive ships appeared in the atmosphere, their dark hulls blocking out the morning sun. They were enormous, each one larger than several city blocks. Strange symbols glowed along their sides, and weapons that looked like giant spears pointed toward the ground. Students screamed and ran in all directions. Teachers tried to maintain order, but panic spread quickly. Car alarms blared as the ship's presence interfered with electronic systems. Hana stood perfectly still in the school courtyard, watching everything with calm eyes. While others panicked, she studied the alien ships with the same careful attention she gave to everything else. She noticed that the ships moved in formation, like military vessels. She saw that their weapons had charging cycles glowing brighter before dimming again. She observed that their shields flickered in regular patterns, suggesting they needed time to recharge. Most importantly, she realized that these aliens had made a mistake. They thought humans would be too frightened to fight back effectively. They had not prepared for organized resistance. As explosions began to shake the city and alien soldiers started landing in the streets, Hana made a decision that would change everything. She would not run and hide this time. The invisible girl was about to become visible in ways no one could have imagined. The alien ships hung in the sky like dark clouds over Seoul. Their shadows covered entire city blocks. Strange sounds came from their hulls like metal grinding against metal. The air itself felt heavy and wrong. Inside Seoul High School, chaos ruled the hallways. Students ran in every direction, screaming and crying. Some tried to call their parents, but the communication networks had stopped working. Teachers shouted orders that nobody followed. Hana walked calmly through the madness. While others panicked, she moved toward the windows facing the main courtyard. She wanted to see what the aliens would do next. Through the glass, she watched small ships detach from the larger vessels. These landing craft moved smoothly through the air, making no sound. They settled on the school sports field like giant metal insects. Doors opened on the sides of the ships. Tall figures in dark armor stepped out. They carried weapons that glowed with blue energy. Their faces were hidden behind smooth helmets, but they moved with the confidence of experienced soldiers. "Everyone stay calm," shouted Principal Kim from the hallway. "Move to the gymnasium in an orderly fashion." But nobody stayed calm. Song Hyuk, the strongest boy in school, grabbed a fire extinguisher and ran toward the front entrance. "I'll fight them," he yelled. Kim Ji-hyo tried to organize the younger students. "Listen to me," she called out. "We need to work together." Kang Woo-jin, the student council president, stood on a chair. "If we cooperate, maybe they won't hurt us," he announced. Hana shook her head quietly. She had read enough military history to know that invaders who came with overwhelming force rarely showed mercy to those who surrendered easily. The alien soldiers reached the main building. They moved through the halls in perfect formation. Their weapons swept back and forth, ready to fire at any threat. When they found students hiding in classrooms, they herded them toward the gymnasium like cattle. Hana pressed herself against a wall and watched them work. She noticed that each soldier had a small device on their chest that blinked with soft light. The blinking followed a pattern: 3 short flashes, then 2 long ones, then a pause. She also saw that their energy shields flickered slightly every time they activated their weapons. The shields seemed to need a moment to recharge after each use. In the gymnasium, the aliens forced all the students and teachers to sit on the floor. One soldier, taller than the others with different markings on his armor, stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice came through a translation device. "I am Commander Vextal of the Threnody Empire," he said. His voice sounded cold and mechanical. "Your world now belongs to us. You will be relocated to serve our purposes." Professor Yoon raised his hand. "Please, we're just teachers and students. We mean no harm." The commander's helmet turned toward the teacher. "Resistance is pointless. Your military forces have been destroyed. Your cities will be occupied. Those who obey will live. Those who resist will die." To prove his point, Commander Vextal pointed his weapon at one of the younger students, a girl named Park Somi, who was only 14. The weapon began to glow brighter. That was when Kang Woo-jin made his mistake. The student council president stood up and walked toward the commander with his hands raised. "We want to cooperate," Woo-jin said. "Just tell us what you want us to do." The commander studied him for a moment. Then, without warning, he fired his weapon. Wu Jin collapsed to the ground, unconscious but breathing. That was a stun setting, the commander announced. Next time I will use full power. No one moves without permission. Fear filled the gymnasium. Students sobbed quietly. Teachers looked helpless. Even Song Hyuk, who had talked about fighting, sat frozen with terror. But Hana was not frozen. Her mind worked quickly, analyzing everything she had observed. The aliens had made several mistakes. They assumed humans would be too afraid to think clearly. They had not posted guards at all the exits. Most importantly, their shields had that weakness she had noticed. While the commander continued his speech about human relocation, Hana slowly moved toward the back of the gymnasium. She used other students as cover, staying low and quiet. Near the emergency exit, she found her friend Daeun huddled against the wall. "Hana, what are you doing?" Daeun whispered. "Getting help," Hana replied softly. "Stay here and keep everyone calm. Where are you going?" "To the chemistry lab." Daeun's eyes went wide. She understood immediately. The chemistry lab had supplies that could be dangerous in the right hands. Hana slipped through the emergency exit while the aliens were focused on the crowd. The hallways were empty now, but she moved carefully. She had seen other soldiers patrolling outside. In the chemistry lab, she found what she needed: potassium nitrate, aluminum powder, sulfur, and several other chemicals. She also took some electronic components from the physics classroom next door. Working quickly but precisely, Hana built 3 small explosive devices. They were not very powerful, but they would be effective if used at the right moment against the right targets. She also found some metal pipes in the maintenance closet. These would help direct the force of the explosions exactly where she wanted them to go. 20 minutes later, Hana returned to the gymnasium through a different route. The aliens were still talking about their plans for human relocation. They had not noticed her absence. She positioned herself near the wall where the alien soldiers stood guard. She had studied their shield patterns and knew exactly when to strike. The device on each soldier's chest continued its blinking pattern. 3 short, 2 long, pause. 3 short, 2 long, pause. Just like she had observed. When the pattern reached the pause, their shields would flicker and weaken for exactly 2 seconds. That was her window. Hana waited for the right moment. Her hands were steady despite everything happening around her. She thought about all the war documentaries she had watched with Daeun. She remembered the lessons about timing and precision. The alien commander raised his weapon toward another student, threatening them to maintain order. The chest devices blinked their pattern. 3 short, 2 long. Hana threw her first explosive device. The explosion lit up the gymnasium. The nearest alien soldier stumbled backward, his shield failing completely. Before he could recover, Hana's second device exploded near the commander. Chaos erupted as students screamed and scattered. But this time, it was the aliens who seemed confused and uncertain. Commander Vextel shouted orders in his own language, but his soldiers could not respond quickly enough. Their shields were recharging, leaving them vulnerable. Hana's third device exploded near the gymnasium's main doors, creating an escape route through the smoke and debris. "Run!" she shouted to the other students. "Everyone out!" For the first time that day, people listened to the quiet girl from the back corner of the classroom. Students and teachers rushed toward the exits while the alien soldiers tried to regroup. The invisible girl had just become very visible indeed. 3 months had passed since the Threnody invasion began. Earth looked very different now. Alien ships patrolled the skies above every major city. Human governments had either surrendered or been destroyed. Military bases lay in ruins across the planet, but in the underground tunnels beneath Seoul, hope still lived. Hana crouched in a maintenance tunnel, studying a map of the city's subway system. Around her sat 43 people she had rescued from various alien processing centers. They included students from her school, workers from nearby offices, and even some former soldiers. "The aliens will move their command ship tomorrow morning," whispered Captain Rodriguez, a former Earth Defense Force officer. Our scouts confirmed it. Rodriguez was a tough woman in her 40s who had fought in the Europa conflicts. When she first met Hana 3 weeks ago, she had laughed at the idea of taking orders from a 17-year-old girl. She was not laughing anymore. "What do you think, Hana?" asked Daeun, who had become Hana's closest advisor. "Can we hit them during the move?" Hana traced her finger along the tunnel map. She had spent weeks learning every path, every access point, every weakness in the alien patrol patterns. The Threnodi were skilled conquerors, but they had never fought humans before. They did not understand how stubborn and creative humans could be. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a spot where 3 subway lines crossed. "Their command ship always follows the same route when they relocate. They think our tunnels are too small to be useful." Sergeant Kim Tae-hyun nodded slowly. He was a stocky man who had initially questioned every order Hana gave. But after she had successfully predicted 3 alien patrol schedules, he began to listen more carefully. "The ship passes directly over this intersection," Hana continued. "Their shields are strongest on the bottom, but they have to reduce power to navigate between our tall buildings." Park Ji-soo, one of her former classmates, leaned forward. "So when do we strike?" "Not when they expect us to," Hana replied. "Everyone thinks the best time to attack is when they're moving slowly. But I've watched their patterns. They're most vulnerable right after they finish moving, when they're setting up their new position." She pulled out a hand-drawn diagram showing the alien ship's energy signature patterns. Over the past month, she had taught herself to read Threnodi technology by studying captured equipment and observing their operations. Their shields drop for exactly 4 minutes and 30 seconds while they establish their new command post, she explained. During that time, they're completely focused on their setup procedures. They won't expect an attack from below. Captain Rodriguez studied the plan. "It's risky. If we fail, they'll hunt us down. If we don't try, they'll process more humans for their labor camps," Hana replied. "I've seen what happens to people in those camps. We can't let it continue." Her voice was quiet but firm. Over the past 3 months, the shy girl from the back of the classroom had learned to speak with authority. People listened when she talked now. Lee Jae-hyun, her former classmate who used to make jokes about her, raised his hand. "What about their escort ships?" "I've counted them," Hana said. "Always the same number, always the same formation. They'll be busy protecting the command ship's flanks. The underside will be our opening." The plan was complex but possible. Hana's group would use the subway tunnels to position themselves directly beneath the command ship's landing zone. When the shields dropped, they would attack using modified mining equipment stolen from a construction site. But the real challenge was not the technology. It was convincing Earth's scattered resistance groups to work together. "The other cells don't trust us," admitted Oh Min-jae, a former engineering student who had joined them 2 weeks earlier. "They think we're too young and inexperienced." "Then we'll prove them wrong," Hana said simply. That night, she met with leaders from 5 other resistance groups in an abandoned subway station. They were all older than her, all former military or government officials. They looked at her with barely hidden skepticism. "You want us to risk our people on the plan of a teenager?" asked Colonel Park, who led the Gangnam resistance cell. "Age doesn't matter," Hana replied calmly. "Results matter. How many alien ships have your groups destroyed?" The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Most resistance cells had focused on hiding and gathering intelligence. Few had attempted direct attacks on Threnodi forces. "Our job is to survive until Earth's military can regroup," said Commander Lee from the Incheon cell. "Earth's military is gone," Hana stated bluntly. "The aliens made sure of that in the first week. If we want to win, we have to do it ourselves." She spread out her maps and technical drawings on an old table. "This is our chance to capture a command ship intact. Think about what we could learn from their technology. Think about the intelligence we could gather from their computers." Yu Nari, a former Air Force pilot who had escaped from an alien prison facility, nodded slowly. "She's right. We've been playing defense too long." "But why should you lead this operation?" asked Colonel Park. "You have no military training." "Because I understand how they think," Hana answered. "I've studied their patterns for 3 months. I know their weaknesses better than anyone." She pointed to her chart showing alien patrol schedules, shield cycles, and communication frequencies. "Military training teaches you to fight human enemies. The Threnodi are not human. They have different weaknesses and different blind spots." After 2 hours of debate, the resistance leaders agreed to try Hana's plan. They would contribute their best fighters and equipment to the operation. 3 days later, 62 resistance fighters gathered in the subway tunnel beneath the target zone. They came from 6 different cells, representing the largest coordinated operation since the invasion began. Hana checked her watch. The command ship would arrive in 10 minutes. Her heart was beating fast, but her hands were steady. She thought about all the people counting on her, all the humans still trapped in alien processing centers. Remember, she told the fighters, we hit hard and fast during their vulnerable window. No heroes, no unnecessary risks. We get the ship and get out. Captain Rodriguez squeezed her shoulder. Ready when you are, Commander, Commander. 3 months ago, nobody had even noticed her in the school hallway. Now people called her Commander and trusted her with their lives. The ground above them vibrated as the massive alien command ship settled into position. Hana closed her eyes and counted the seconds, visualizing the shield deactivation sequence she had memorized. Shields dropping in 30 seconds, she whispered into her radio. This was the moment that would change everything. The invisible girl was about to become impossible to ignore. The captured Threnody command ship sat in a hidden underground facility beneath Sol. Its silver hull gleamed under bright work lights as human engineers crawled over every surface, studying alien technology that was centuries ahead of their own. Hana stood on a metal platform overlooking the massive vessel. She was 18 now, and the past year of war had changed her. She was taller, stronger, and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had proven herself in battle many times. The ship's computer systems are incredible, reported O Minjae, wiping grease from his hands. As the Resistance's chief engineer, he had spent weeks learning how Threnody technology worked. Their shields can stop almost any human weapon. Almost, Hana corrected quietly. We found their weakness once. We can find others. The successful capture of the command ship had made Hana famous among Earth's resistance groups. Stories of the ghost of Sol High spread across the planet. But fame brought new problems. The military commanders on Europa Station refused to recognize your authority, reported Kim Seungjin, her new communications officer. He had been a quiet student in her chemistry class before the war. Now he coordinated messages between resistance cells across 3 continents. Hana nodded. She had expected this. Earth's remaining government officials and military leaders were hiding in space stations and underground bunkers. They did not want to admit that their most successful commander was a teenager who had learned strategy from old books and war documentaries. What about Mars Colony? She asked. Same response, Seungjin replied. They're demanding that you turn over command to General Harrison. General Harrison was a career military officer who had lost 3 major battles against the Threnody in the war's first month. Hana had read his tactical reports. His strategies followed traditional military doctrine, which was exactly why they failed against alien opponents. We can't wait for their approval, Hana decided. The aliens are planning something big. Our captured intelligence indicates they're bringing in their elite Third Fleet. She walked over to a holographic display showing Threnody fleet movements around Earth. Red dots represented enemy ships, while green dots showed the few remaining human forces. The numbers were not encouraging. Admiral Korthax is commanding the new fleet, added Captain Rodriguez, reading from a translated alien report. According to our prisoners, he's never lost a battle. Everyone loses eventually, Hana said. We just need to find the right way to make it happen. She had learned much from interrogating captured Threnody officers. The aliens were proud and aggressive, but they were also predictable. They followed rigid military traditions that made them vulnerable to unconventional tactics. Gather the cell leaders, she ordered. It's time to expand our operations. 2 weeks later, Hana stood before 50 resistance commanders in an abandoned subway station. They represented every major human settlement still fighting the occupation. Some had traveled for days through dangerous alien-controlled territory to attend this meeting. The enemy thinks they understand us, she began. They see humans as primitive and emotional. They expect us to fight like the other species they've conquered. She activated a holographic display showing the galaxy. Red areas indicated Threnody-controlled territory, which covered nearly half the known worlds. But we're not like the other species, she continued. We adapt faster than they expect. We improvise when their rules say it's impossible. Most importantly, we never give up. Colonel Park from the Gangnam cell raised his hand. What are you proposing? Coordinated strikes across 12 worlds simultaneously, Hana replied. Not just Earth, but every Threnody prison planet in this sector. The room erupted in surprised voices. Such an operation would require resources and coordination, far beyond anything the human resistance had attempted. That's impossible, protested Commander Lee from Incheon. We don't have enough ships or fighters. We don't need to fight ship-to-ship battles, Hana explained. We fight the way humans have always fought when outnumbered. We use intelligence, deception, and surprise. She showed them detailed plans she had been developing for months. The operation would rely on captured alien technology, improvised weapons, and most importantly, help from other enslaved species. The Threnodi have been conquering worlds for centuries, she said. Every victory created more enemies. The Voltani were enslaved 80 years ago. The Krogans have been fighting them for 50 years. There are dozens of species waiting for a chance to rebel. Yunari leaned forward. And you think they'll help us? I know they will, Hana replied, because we're going to prove that the Threnodi can be beaten. Once other species see that resistance is possible, they'll join us. The plan was incredibly complex. It required precise timing across multiple star systems, coordinated communication despite alien surveillance, and the cooperation of species that had never worked together before. But Hana had learned that impossible was just another word for difficult. Over the next month, she worked 18 hours a day preparing for the operation. She studied alien prisoner reports to understand Threnodi psychology. She memorized star charts showing prison planet locations. She learned basic phrases in 12 different alien languages. Most importantly, she trained new commanders to think like her. The resistance could not depend on one person forever. They needed leaders who understood unconventional warfare and adaptive tactics. Remember, she told her students during training sessions, the enemy's greatest strength is also their weakness. They're so confident in their superiority that they don't prepare for creative solutions. Park Jisoo, now one of her best lieutenants, nodded thoughtfully, like using their own communication frequencies against them. Exactly, Hana confirmed. They never expect primitive humans to understand their technology well enough to turn it against them. The night before the operation began, Hana stood alone on the platform overlooking the captured command ship. In a few hours, she would coordinate the largest military operation in human history. 62 resistance cells across 12 worlds would strike simultaneously. Dayun joined her on the platform. Are you nervous? Terrified, Hana admitted quietly. If this fails, the resistance dies with it. And if it succeeds? Hana looked at the alien ship they had captured through careful planning and desperate courage. If it succeeds, the galaxy learns that humans don't surrender easily. She thought about her old classroom, where she used to sit invisible in the back corner. Now she was planning operations that would span multiple star systems and involve thousands of fighters, from dozens of species. Status. Report, she said into her communication device. Voices responded from across the galaxy. Human fighters hidden in asteroid fields, Voltani rebels in underground cities, Krogan warriors preparing for battle, all of them waiting for her signal. All units report ready, confirmed Seungjin from the communication center. Hana took a deep breath. The quiet girl who used to hide from attention was about to command the largest coordinated rebellion in galactic history. Operation Liberation begins in 10 minutes, she announced. The Shadow Admiral was ready to step out of the shadows. 2 years after the first alien ship appeared over Seoul, Admiral Lee Hana commanded the largest human fleet in history. Her flagship, the captured and modified Threnodi, vessel now called Seoul's Revenge, led a formation of 60 ships through the dark space between Earth and the Moon. The fleet included vessels from 12 different worlds and 7 different species. Human destroyers flew alongside Voltani cruisers and Krogan battleships. It was a sight that would have been impossible before the war began. Enemy fleet detected, announced Yunari from the pilot station. She had become one of the finest space pilots in the Resistance, able to outfly both human and alien veterans. It's big, Admiral. Really big. Hana stood on the bridge of her flagship studying the tactical display. The Imperial Armada that filled the screen was indeed massive. Over 300 Threnodi warships led by Emperor Zarthul himself. They had come to end the human rebellion once and for all. They're confident, observed Captain Rodriguez, now serving as Hana's executive officer. Maybe too confident. Confidence can be a weakness, Hana agreed. She had learned this lesson many times over the past 2 years. They think overwhelming numbers guarantee victory. Her own fleet looked tiny compared to the Imperial Armada, but Hana had not built her reputation by fighting fair battles. She specialized in turning enemy advantages into disadvantages, All ships maintain formation, she ordered. Begin Phase 1 of the Deception Protocol. Across the fleet, human ships suddenly changed course. They appeared to retreat toward Earth in disorder, as if panic had broken their coordination. Several ships even fired their engines in the wrong direction, making them look damaged and desperate. The Threnody fleet pursued immediately, just as Hana had predicted they would. Emperor Zarthul wanted to destroy the human fleet before dealing with Earth itself. He saw this as a chance to end the rebellion with one decisive battle, but the retreat was carefully planned. Hana's ships led the enemy fleet through an asteroid field where her allies had been waiting for weeks. Phase 2, she announced calmly. Hidden among the asteroids, automated weapons platforms suddenly activated. These were not advanced alien weapons, but simple human missiles modified with Voltani guidance systems. They struck the Imperial Armada's lead ships before the aliens realized they had flown into a trap. Direct hits on 12 enemy vessels, reported O Minjae from the engineering station. Their formation is breaking up, but the trap was just the beginning. As the Threnody fleet struggled to reform their lines, Hana's ships suddenly reversed course. Instead of continuing to retreat, they attacked from unexpected angles. All fighters begin attack runs, ordered Hana. Small human fighters swarmed around the much larger alien ships like angry insects. They were too small and fast for the Threnody's main weapons, but their modified missiles could damage critical systems. At the same time, Krogan heavy cruisers attacked the enemy fleets. Flanks while Voltani ships used their advanced technology to jam Threnody communications. The enemy is trying to regroup, announced Kim Sungjin from the communication station. But our jamming is working. They can't coordinate their response. Emperor Zarthul's voice suddenly filled the communication channels. His translation device made his anger clear even across species barriers. Primitive humans, he snarled. You fight like cowards, hiding behind tricks and deception. Hana activated her own transmitter. Her voice went out across both fleets, calm and steady. We fight like survivors, she replied, something your empire never learned to appreciate. The battle continued for 6 hours. Hana's fleet used every unconventional tactic she had developed over 2 years of warfare. They used asteroid debris as weapons, turned captured alien technology against its creators, and coordinated attacks across multiple species that had never worked together before. Most importantly, they never fought the kind of battle the Threnody expected. Admiral, the Emperor's flagship is moving toward Earth, warned Yunari. He's trying to escape the battle zone. Hana studied the tactical display. Zarthul's ship was heavily damaged but still dangerous. If it reached Earth's surface, it could destroy entire cities before being stopped. Set course to intercept, she ordered. All ships converge on the flagship. The chase led them through the wreckage of dozens of destroyed vessels. Both human and alien ships drifted dark and broken among the debris. The cost of the battle had been high for both sides. But as they approached the Emperor's ship, Hana saw that her unconventional strategy was working. The Imperial Armada was scattered and confused. Their rigid military doctrine had not prepared them for the kind of creative, adaptive warfare that humans specialized in. Their shields are failing, reported Captain Rodriguez. Multiple hull breaches detected. This is our chance, Hana announced to her fleet. All ships focus fire on the Emperor's vessel. The combined firepower of 60 ships from 7 different worlds concentrated on Zarthul's flagship. Human plasma cannons, Voltani energy beams, and Krogan kinetic missiles struck the alien ship from every direction. The Emperor's ship tried to return fire, but its weapon systems had been damaged in the earlier battle. Its once mighty shields flickered and died under the sustained assault. Emperor Zarthul, your ship is disabled, Hana broadcast. Surrender now, and your crew will be treated according to galactic law. The response was immediate and predictable. Threnody pride would never allow their leader to surrender to what they considered a primitive species. We will never yield to inferior beings, Zarthul replied. The Empire will avenge this defeat. Then the Empire will have to find a new leader, Hana said quietly. Her fleet's final volley struck the Emperor's ship directly in its power core. The massive vessel exploded in a flash of light that could be seen from Earth's surface. The death of Emperor Zarthul sent shockwaves through the surviving Imperial fleet. Without their leader, the rigid Threnody command structure collapsed. Some ships fled toward the outer system. Others simply stopped fighting and waited for orders that would never come. Admiral, "We're receiving surrender signals from multiple enemy vessels," announced Songjin. Hana nodded slowly. After 2 years of desperate fighting, the tide had finally turned. The Threnody Empire, which had conquered half the galaxy through overwhelming force and rigid discipline, had been defeated by a coalition of species they had considered inferior. "Accept their surrenders," she ordered, "and begin rescue operations for all survivors, human and alien alike." She looked out at the battlefield where the impossible had just happened. A teenage girl who used to hide in the back corner of a classroom had just commanded the largest space battle in galactic history. But as she watched her ships rescuing survivors from both sides of the conflict, Hana knew this victory was not hers alone. It belonged to every human who had refused to surrender, every alien species who had chosen to fight for freedom, and everyone who had believed that the galaxy could be better than it was. The girl no one had noticed in school had become the admiral, no one could ignore in battle. But more importantly, she had proven that humans could unite the galaxy in ways the Threnody Empire never could. The war was ending, but a new chapter in galactic history was just beginning. 5 years had passed since the first alien ship appeared over Seoul High School. Now, Admiral Lee Hana stood in the same classroom where she had once been invisible. But everything was different. The school had been rebuilt as a memorial to the human resistance. The old desk where she used to sit alone was now marked with a simple metal plaque that read, "Heroes are made in quiet moments." Students from across the galaxy came here to learn about the war that changed everything. Hana was 22 years old now, and she commanded the Terran Defense Fleet, the largest military force in galactic history. But today she wore a simple civilian outfit instead of her admiral's uniform. She wanted to speak to these students as the person she had been, not the hero she had become. "Many of you probably think heroes are born special," she said to the mixed group of human and alien students sitting in the restored classroom. "You imagine they always knew they were different, always felt confident and brave." A young Voltani student raised her hand. "Weren't you always a leader, Admiral?" Hana smiled and shook her head. "I sat in that back corner for 3 years without anyone knowing my name. My own teachers forgot I existed. I was so quiet that people looked right through me." The students seemed surprised. The stories they had heard painted her as a natural-born commander who had always been destined for greatness. "Then how did you become the greatest military leader in galactic history?" asked a human boy who looked to be about 16. "By paying attention to things other people ignored," Hana replied, "and by caring more about doing what was right than about being noticed for doing it." She walked over to her old seat and sat down, just like she had thousands of times during her school years. The students leaned forward, eager to hear more. "When the aliens first arrived, everyone else was screaming or running or trying to negotiate," she continued. "But I watched. I studied their patterns. I noticed their weaknesses, not because I was brave, but because that's what I had always done." A young Krogan warrior raised his hand. His species valued courage above all other qualities. "But you were brave when you fought them." "I was terrified," Hana admitted. "Every single time. But I learned that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what needs to be done even when you're scared." She stood up and walked to the window that overlooked Seoul. The city had been completely rebuilt after the war. Human and alien architects had worked together to create something new and beautiful. Ships from dozens of different worlds moved peacefully through the sky. "The real lesson isn't about me," she said, turning back to the students. "It's about all of us. Humans, Voltani, Krogans, even former Threnody soldiers. We learned that our differences make us stronger, not weaker." An older student, probably a graduate researcher, raised her hand. "What about the critics who say the war could have been avoided through diplomacy?" Hana considered the question carefully. Even now, 5 years later, some politicians and academics argued that better communication could have prevented the conflict. "Maybe they're right," she said finally. "I hope future leaders are wiser than we were. But when someone shows up with overwhelming force and demands your surrender, sometimes you have to prove that you can't be easily conquered." She thought about all the friends she had lost during the war. Captain Rodriguez, who had died defending Europa Station. Sergeant Taehyun, killed in the liberation of the Krogan homeworld. Too many others to count. "The cost was terrible," she continued quietly. "Every leader who survives a war carries the weight of those who didn't. We fight so others don't have to, but we never forget that there might have been another way. A small human girl in the front row raised her hand shyly. She reminded Hana of herself at that age. What should we do if we feel invisible, like nobody notices us? Hana knelt down to meet the girl's eyes. Use it, she said gently. Invisible people see things others miss. They notice details that loud people overlook. Some of the most important work in the galaxy is done by people nobody pays attention to. But what if we want to help but don't know how? Start small, Hana advised. I started by noticing patterns in alien technology. You might start by noticing when someone needs a friend, or when a problem has a solution nobody else has seen. Heroes aren't born in dramatic moments. They're built through small choices made every day. After the students left, Hana remained in the empty classroom. Dayan joined her, just like she had during so many lunch breaks years ago. Do you ever miss it? Dayan asked. She now ran the Academy for Interspecies Military Strategy, training the next generation of galactic peacekeepers. Miss what? Being invisible? Being able to sit quietly and watch without anyone expecting anything from you? Hana considered the question. Her life now was filled with meetings, ceremonies, and responsibilities she could never have imagined as a shy teenager. Sometimes, she admitted, but I've learned that you can still be quiet and observant, even when everyone is watching. The skills I developed sitting in this corner help me every day. They walked together through the memorial garden that now surrounded the school. Monuments honored the resistance fighters who had given their lives, but also the alien soldiers who had eventually joined the fight for freedom. What's next for you? Dayan asked. Hana looked up at the sky where ships from dozens of worlds moved in peaceful formation. The Galactic Federation was still young, still learning how to balance the needs of so many different species. There are still worlds beyond our borders where people fight for freedom, she said, and there are always new challenges that require creative solutions. A group of young officers approached, saluting respectfully. Among them was Kim Sung-jin, now a full admiral himself, and Oh Min-jae, who led the Federation's technology development program. Admiral, the Council is ready for your report on the frontier situation, Sung-jin announced. Hana nodded and took one last look at the classroom where everything had begun. The desk where she used to hide was now visited by thousands of people each year. But the real lesson wasn't about her transformation from invisible student to galactic hero. The real lesson was that heroes could come from anywhere. They could be shy students reading old books in back corners. They could be former enemies who chose to fight for justice. They could be anyone willing to pay attention, care about others, and act when action was needed. As she walked toward her waiting transport, Hana thought about all the quiet students sitting in classrooms across the galaxy. Some of them were probably being overlooked right now, just as she had been. But someday, when the galaxy needed them most, they would step forward. They would prove that the most unlikely people often make the greatest heroes. The girl no one had noticed in school had become the hero no one could ignore in battle. But more importantly, she had shown that everyone had the potential to be noticed when it truly mattered. The galaxy was in good hands, protected by heroes both famous and invisible, all working together to build a future worth fighting for. In her old classroom, new students would soon fill the seats. Some would sit in the front, eager for attention. Others would find their way to the back corners quiet and observant. And someday, when they were needed most, they too would discover that being overlooked was just another word for being ready to surprise. Everyone, the legacy of the invisible girl lived on in every student who learned that true strength often came from the most unexpected places. 10 years after the end of the Threnody War, the galaxy had settled into an era of unprecedented peace and cooperation. The Galactic Federation now included over 200 worlds, each contributing their unique strengths to the growing alliance. Admiral Lee Hana, now 27, stood on the observation deck of the Federation flagship Unity. Through the massive viewport, she could see the construction of New Harmony Station, a joint project involving engineers from 15 different species. The Outer Rim territories are requesting Federation membership, reported Captain Park Jisoo, handing her a data tablet. Jisoo had grown into an excellent diplomatic officer, skilled at communicating with species that had never encountered humans before. Hana studied the request. 3 star systems on the galaxy's edge had heard about the Federation's principles of cooperation and mutual defense. They wanted protection from raiders and pirates who preyed on isolated worlds. What do our scouts report about the situation out there? She asked. The usual problems, replied Commander Yu Nari, who now led the Federation's reconnaissance division. Criminal organizations taking advantage of worlds that can't defend themselves. Nothing we can't handle. But Hana had learned to look deeper than surface problems. In her experience, situations that seemed simple usually weren't. Schedule a meeting with their representatives, she decided. But let's make sure we understand what we're really getting into. The years since the war had taught her that peace was more complicated than victory. Defeating the Threnody Empire had been difficult, but building something better in its place was an ongoing challenge. Her communication device chimed with an incoming message. The sender was listed as Seoul High School Memorial Academy. Admiral Hana, came a young voice through the speaker. This is student researcher Kim Min-soo. I'm working on a project about the early resistance movement, and I was hoping to interview you. Hana smiled. She received dozens of these requests each month from students studying the war. She tried to respond to as many as possible, especially from young people who reminded her of her former self. I'd be happy to help with your research, she replied. What specifically are you investigating? I'm trying to understand how you developed your tactical innovations, the student explained. Most military historians focus on the big battles, but I'm more interested in the small decisions that made them possible. The question impressed her. This student was thinking like she had learned to think, looking for the details that others overlooked. That's an excellent approach, she said. The truth is, most of our success came from paying attention to things the enemy considered unimportant. Over the next hour, she spoke with the student about pattern recognition, adaptive thinking, and the importance of questioning assumptions. It was the kind of conversation she wished she could have had with someone when she was struggling to find her place in the world. After the call ended, she found herself thinking about all the young people across the galaxy who were probably sitting quietly in classrooms, reading books that others ignored, noticing things that teachers overlooked. Admiral, we have a situation developing in the Proxima sector, announced Lieutenant Oh Min-jae Jr., the son of her old friend and now a promising young officer himself. Pirates are attacking civilian transports. Hana studied the tactical display. The attack pattern looked familiar, like something she had seen before. But it took her a moment to remember where. These aren't ordinary pirates, she realized. Look at their formation and timing. This is organized military action disguised as random raids. She called up intelligence reports from the past 6 months, looking for connections others might have missed. There it was, a pattern of seemingly unrelated incidents that actually showed careful coordination. Someone is testing our response times and capabilities, she announced. They want to know how quickly we can deploy forces to the outer rim. Her staff looked surprised. The individual attacks had seemed like routine security problems, but together, they revealed a larger strategy. Orders, Admiral? Asked Captain Jisoo. Deploy the 3rd Fleet to Proxima, but keep our main forces here, Hana decided. If someone is planning something bigger, they'll expect us to overcommit to the obvious threat. It was the same kind of thinking that had helped her defeat the Threnody Empire. Look beyond the surface, question the obvious, and always consider what the enemy wanted you to believe. 3 weeks later, her caution proved justified. While the 3rd Fleet dealt with pirates in the Proxima sector, long-range sensors detected a massive fleet moving toward Federation space from the opposite direction. They're former Threnody military units, reported the intelligence officer, survivors who escaped during the Empire's collapse. They've been building their strength in the unexplored regions. Hana studied the enemy formation. They had learned from their defeats, adapting human tactics while keeping their advanced technology. It would be a much more challenging fight than the original war. Send a message to all Federation worlds, she ordered. Full mobilization. And contact the Academy. I want every student who studied unconventional warfare assigned to the planning committee. The message went out across the galaxy. On hundreds of worlds, beings of dozens of species prepared for war once again. But this time was different. This time they fought not as separate resistance groups, but as a unified force. In the Academy's strategy room, young officers from many species worked alongside seasoned veterans. Among them was Kim Min-soo, the student who had interviewed Hana. His research into small decisions and overlooked details had earned him a place on the tactical planning team. Admiral, the students have developed some interesting ideas, reported Daeun, who had traveled from the Academy to assist with the planning. They're thinking in ways that might surprise our enemies. Hana reviewed their proposals. The young strategists had studied every major battle of the previous war, but instead of copying successful tactics, they had identified underlying principles and adapted them to new situations. They understand, she said approvingly. It's not about repeating what worked before. It's about thinking the way we learned to think. The battle, when it came, lasted 3 days. The former Threnody forces had indeed learned from their previous defeats, but they had made a crucial mistake. They had prepared to fight the Federation as it existed at the end of the last war, not as it had evolved since then. The Federation fleet that met them included ships and crews from species the original Threnody Empire had never encountered. New allies brought new technologies, new tactics, and new ways of thinking about space warfare. Most importantly, the Federation had developed something the old Empire never possessed: the ability to adapt and learn from every member species. Enemy fleet is requesting terms for surrender, announced Captain Jisoo after the final engagement. Hana nodded. Accept their surrender, and prepare medical assistance for their wounded. As she had learned years ago, true victory meant building something better from the aftermath of conflict. In the months that followed, many of the surrendered Threnody joined the Federation as full members. They brought their knowledge and skills to the growing alliance, just as former enemies had done after the First War. Hana often thought about the strange path that had brought her from the back corner of a classroom to command of the galaxy's largest peacekeeping force. But she knew her story was just one example of something much larger. Across the Federation, former outcasts and overlooked individuals had found their voices. The quiet Voltani engineer who designed better starship engines, the shy Krogan warrior who developed new training methods, the ignored human colonist who discovered a cure for a plague that had threatened multiple worlds. The galaxy had learned to notice the people it used to overlook, and those people had learned that being different was not a weakness to hide, but a strength to offer. On her final visit to Seoul High School before accepting a new assignment exploring uncharted regions, Hana sat once more in her old seat. The plaque on the desk had been joined by others, honoring students from across the galaxy who had made important contributions to galactic civilization. A new message had been carved into the desk beside the original inscription. The galaxy learned to notice. Below that, in smaller letters, someone had added, "And the quiet ones learned to speak." Hana traced the words with her finger, thinking about all the shy students sitting in classrooms across hundreds of worlds. Some of them were probably feeling invisible right now, just as she had felt so many years ago. But they were not invisible. They were just waiting for the right moment to show the galaxy what they could do. As she prepared to leave for the frontier, where new challenges and new opportunities waited, Hana carried with her the most important lesson she had learned. Heroes were not born from confidence or recognition. They were made in quiet moments by people who cared enough to pay attention and act when action was needed. The girl no one had noticed in school had become the hero no one could ignore in battle. But more than that, she had helped create a galaxy where everyone could find their place, where being different was valued, and where the quiet voices could change everything. The revolution that had begun in the back corner of a classroom continued across the stars, carried forward by every person who had ever felt overlooked and learned to see that as an advantage rather than a limitation. In the end, that was the greatest victory of all. A galaxy that had learned to notice, to listen, and to value the contributions of every individual, no matter how quiet they might seem. The legacy lived on, in every classroom, on every world, wherever someone sat quietly and observed, waiting for their moment to surprise everyone with what they could accomplish. The quiet revolution continued, one overlooked hero at a time.